Good evening and welcome to the Thought Process talk show organized by the People's Code team to welcome to all the revolutionary people of Myanmar. We are here today on the very last day of 2023, December 31st, and we'd like to wish you all a happy new year. We wish you an auspicious new year that will be coming very soon to all of you. With our warm wishes, we'd like to greet you from on behalf of the People's Go team. Our thought process program is a weekly program where we will have invited speakers to talk to discuss together at 7 p.m. Myanmar time, because our goal is not only about getting rid of the military dictatorship. It is also about changing the mindset, ideology, as well as on the the way of thinking as well. So because Myanmar has been facing very bad concepts, ideas and the way of thinking for so long, so that we have lived under a long time of colonization where there is oppression and suppression of the majority against the minority for so long. So that is a reason we have chosen the title of today's talk show as Decolonizing the Myanmar Spring Revolution. In other words, the decolonization in the Spring Revolution. So very soon, Myanmar will be turning a new year. And as you all know, that Myanmar has been, very soon it will also be the Independence Day. It has been many years since Myanmar had gained independence from the British colonialists as well. That it will be very soon, 76 years since independence from being a British colony from the British Empire. So the question is, have Myanmar really emerged from the colonialist ideas? Has Myanmar really been freed from the new colonialism as well? So in other words, we'll need to be discussed about what is independence. When we say independence, is it about do we really have we claimed independence, and that how do we shape the independence in Myanmar in terms of culture, politics, as well as an economy? So whenever we talk about independence in Myanmar, a lot of people will understand, but a lot of people might not agree with the concept as well, because Myanmar still is very much under the grips of these all the controlling parties as well. So what we will be talking today is to talk about what has been happening in Myanmar, and that although that there has been emergence of new concepts and theories, and yet it is also time for us to be able to get away from the grips of this colonialist heritage as well. That this is what we'll be talking today. So if we look at the decolonization in the Spring Revolution, it's about it's about the heritage of the various communities in Myanmar at the moment. When with the Spring Revolution, that we are trying to complete them, that completely change, eradicate the deep-rooted impacts of the new colonialism, along with the contemporary liberation movement as well, because that also is what augurs us from the third year of the Spring Revolution. So this is what we'll be discussing as well. So for us, that freedom to break free from the colonialized political economy life, and that to be able to gain national equality, as well as the human rights, collective rights, justice, and that sovereignty and self-determination. These are all important for us. So what are the aspects of the revolution that must be carried out in order to fully regain the right to self-determination, among others, as well as on the question of how new ideas need to be cultivated? That's what we'll be discussing today, along with the speakers in today's talk show as well. The speakers, so we have invited today that we have writers, we also have the research, we also have Chinthe, who is an author, as well as on the and a researcher, and we also have Sia So Albert Chu, who is a current activist, and then last but not the least, we also have Nyan Thit, a researcher, as well as on the leader of a research institution. So my name is Susan Tuen, and I'll be a moderator for today's talk show program. To start our discussion, as moderator, I would like to invite the speakers to introduce themselves. I would like to invite each and every speaker to give a short introduction about who you are, which organization would you work in, as well as what your current activities are. So please share as much as you can with our audience. I would like to first invite Siama Chinthe. Chinthe, please. Thank you. Thank you to the People's Code Thought Process team for inviting me, moderator, interpreters, and the team, the People Codes team. I would like to say thank you to all of you. As a moderator have introduced me, you can call me Chinthe or Miss Lion. I'm a writer right now. I'm also doing that research. I'm looking at the Myanmar mainstream culture in particular. What are the cultural traditions in Myanmar? Has a lot of traditions and culture. And what I focus on is the culture of the Burma people, especially in the urban culture of that. So we are looking at the in terms of anthropology. I'm looking in particular at the Burma urban culture as well as all the traditions of the Burma urban community. So this is my area of research. Next, I would like to invite Sia Nyambide, a researcher and a leader of a research institution. Please introduce yourself to the organizers of the People's Code Thought Process Program and that those who have organized today's topic. I would like to say thank you very much indeed for organizing today's discussion. I'm a researcher. I'm also that about 10 years ago, I started a research institution as well. I also had been leading the research institution in the current situation. However, I am a researcher, and that as a researcher, I have been looking at it from the anthropological. I'm studying the current situation from the anthropological perspective. When we talk about what is happening today in Myanmar currently, before the coup took place, we have in Myanmar, we have when we look at the nation building of the successive the governments, leaders, and dictators. I look at how the change in what has been the evolution of the political structures in Myanmar through the successive governments. How did the governance systems have changed, and how did the change how did the change go into to the bottom from to the people? That's what I have been studying as a researcher. Thank you. Thank you, Sia Nyanite, for the introduction. May I now invite Sia Soitachu to introduce yourself? Sia Alberto, please. Mingalaba to all of you. And I would like to say thank you to People's School Program for inviting me. My name is So Albert Chu. I'm a current activist and I'm also I'm also a member of the Korean Youth Research Team as well. Thank you. Now that the speakers have introduced themselves, I would like to start with the discussion. Very soon, it will be Independence Days of Myanmar, which falls on the 4th of January. So before we talk about, that soon the Independence Day is coming soon with the aim of the speeding up and raising the movement and all the people's discussion or the public discussion on the concept of independence, liberation, independence and liberation. So we'd like to organize today's debate on decolonization in the Spring Revolution. To achieve the goal of the People's Revolution, that it is important for the community to also to eradicate also the enemies ideas in the political systems in our mindset as well, because that's an important part of the revolution too. So for that to be able to, if we really want to revolutionize not only the ideas, but not only the idea, but also like you have the concepts such as genocide or the war crimes. It is also important for us to recognize that the genocide and the war crimes have happened in Myanmar, and that and we also need to understand what caused these genocide and war crimes to continue as well. That scholars and that scholars as well as democracy activists as well as human rights defenders and other activists around the world have been warning the population of the global population against neo-colonialism, and it has been decades there has been such warnings like that. So here I would like to first invite Sia Nyampide to with this opening question. So, what is colonization and what is new colonization? Would you please explain? So, based on can you clarify these concepts based on that human experience or the social experience from the anthropological perspective? I think so. I would like to know is what is colonization, what is new colonialism, and based on the life experience and people of Myanmar have learned from the different experiences. Can you also please explain explain it from that perspective as well? Because when we talk about the decolonization of knowledge and the British colonization, there was also colonialization of knowledge and the British colonialism, as well as there was also Buddhism or the Burmanization, patriarchy, as well as the militarization, as well as the nation building have all done under the colonization. Can you also explain it from the term, from the concept of eradicating all these concepts? To respond to your question, I will start with colonization. So when we talk about colonization, Myanmar was colonized or annexed by the British Empire. So Myanmar was a colony of the British Empire. As a colonized country, what we understand, there are some concepts we understand as what is colony, what is colonization or colonialism. So colonization is that a country, it could be another country, or I would say it could also be other non-state entities. So we can say that another country or another power came to dominate the original settlers or the inhabitants of a particular nation. So they will control the territory, they will govern that population, and also is those who govern or the colonialists, they also instill their culture, their traditions, their governance system, economy, as well as some, other elements. They use different ways. They use political as well as on the administration as well as economy. They control and they manipulate and they dominate that particular territory or the population. That's how we define colonization. But if we define colonization as such, we have as a Myanmar, we have been colonized by the British Empire. So in a way, is when we talk about being a colony or a colonialist or colonization, it's often is another country. For example, like it's about being taken control of an area or country by being enslaved by the people as well. But what we understand by colonization is not just a Western country coming into, for example, like in the case of Myanmar, before we were known as Burma, or the Burma was being taken control by another country, and that socially, politically, culturally, economically, that is being controlled and managed by the another country. But colonization is much more than that. It is important to see beyond that as well, because when the colonialists, when the British Empire colonized, it is important not only about the being under control of the British authority or the British system. It's more than that. The implications are much broader than that. Those who are born in Myanmar, those who have been educated in Myanmar, those who grew up in Myanmar as a society, that we need to understand that colonialism as colonialism in Myanmar context, and that a country that is known, a country that has been named as Myanmar or Burma, that the education we receive in this country and the knowledge that we have gained from this education. What is a colony? What is colony? Is that this is something that it's more than that. What is colonialism or being controlled by another country? As a researcher, what I would like to say is colonialism is much more beyond. But here, what I will be sharing is rather than a very much of a textbook definition that we learn in school about what is colonization. What I'll be sharing is based on my experience as well. What I'm saying is that a country and that is called as Myanmar. It is more colonization is much more than the textbook definition in any given textbook. What I will be sharing about colonization is that comes from knowledge as a researcher based on my research inside Myanmar as well as on the learning from other countries and from my knowledge of self understanding as what is a colony. That's what I will this is what I'll be explaining. And then what I would also like to talk about knowledge or to know that when we say knowledge, because there is also the colonization, not only about the territory, but also about the our knowledge has been colonized as well, and that then how do we also that how do we decolonize our knowledge? That by decolonizing the knowledge, what kind of independence can we gain? What will be the positive consequences of such decolonization of knowledge? Firstly, I will start with what is the colonialization or the colonialist system. That's something I have learned and discovered through my work as a researcher. So once a country has been colonized by a power, by a superior power, a power or a country that seems to be more powerful politically, militarily, and economically, and they take control of another country or another territory by means of it could be by means of military invasion, and they colonize the country. They take control of that territory or that particular country. In such a case, from a researcher's perspective, what I see in this act of domination, of taking control, is that so that and that I would like to start from what I understand as a researcher from this act of taking control of that so what we can see in a colonization, we see particular changes in the governance system. That in Myanmar case, for example, like we also see the exploitation of resources, both natural resources such as the timber as well as on the minerals, and that all these resources will be exported to British and to Britain and to less as used in British industrialization. That is part of that is colonialization that we understand. But in such colonization, the key is the colonialist power, or those colonialist power which colonize the knowledge of the population as well as of the knowledge of the other population. There is a taking control, there is also the oppression, there is also the dominance of in terms of knowledge. So what dominates and oppress education system is controlled by the colonialists, and the colonial system of the curriculum is controlled by the colonialists. Language is also colonized. They will also colonize the language. They also that colonize religion by sending missionaries to propagate their religion, and all these actions are also part of what we call as knowledge colonization. That the knowledge of the population of a particular territory is being colonized at the same time. In Myanmar, or formerly Burma, that we have the traditions, we have beliefs, we have cultures, and the languages that existed before before the arrival of the colonialism, or the knowledge. In other words, this colonization of knowledge, in a way, is contribute to hiding or hiding or that or dis that that pushing down the existing cultural practices as well as other languages as well. Often colonization of knowledge is quite interconnected with the governance system. A territory that they want to control politically, that politically as well as on the economically, they control. But the control is also going through the colonization of knowledge. So as a researcher, how I see this is that the British colonialists under the British rule for governance system, to have a functioning governance system, when you have a ethnic, when you have a group of the ethnicity that wants to control the population, they want to extract the natural resources, they want to build economic power, they want to build political power, and that is the purpose in controlling, taking control of a particular territorial population. And with that control of economic resources, political power, there are also other implications of the local population. There are also many other losses in addition to the political and economic control. What I recall is that as a simple human being, we all that that if we live if we live on our own, and that we can, as a society, as a human beings, we live we live independently, we live as a community, and all this our own independence has been lost. To give you an example, for example, when I go to the mountainous areas of Myanmar, mountain regions like Chinthe, Kachin, or Chinland or Kachinland, or that other such mountainous areas, like there, that people that that they have they don't try to govern others. They don't consider themselves superiors to the other tribes or the communities. As a human being, we have social needs. We have needs to be able to cultivate paddy for rice. Some of them will hunt for meat. Some of them will also, gatherer, or they would also, farmers, cultivators. There are also a fight for territory as well, because it is part of human nature. That what I'm trying to say is hierarchy. There is no hierarchy that I might, our tribe, our community is go govern another. We don't have such kind of a control or dominance. There is no hierarchy, or there is no kind of a hierarchy of power, that all the people live in their own territory. They hunt, they gather. When these independent territories have been colonized, there is a centralized and hierarchical governance system, which led to the loss of traditional systems of governance, as well as on the existence. For example, like now we have townships in Myanmar. You have a district governors. You have the township governance system. You also have the district township system. All these systems did not exist before, where people talk to each other, people react to each other, people interact with each other. Like people in this valley live there, they will talk to the people from the other mountain or other valley. They will talk to the people from the central plain, but they talk and communicate and engage in a human matter. It is natural, it is organic. They talk to each other. That kind of a context, the kind of a scenario, the kind of engagement interaction has been lost through the process of colonization. That when you have a colonial system, when you have a hierarchy of those who are at the higher up the totem pole and lower down, there is like a system or subordination, even in social that communication as well. In our knowledge has been damaged by the colonialism, and part of this damage is that a country, the territory of a country, or the territory of an area, has been set aside as well. As a as a human beings, we all tend to move to where the grass is greener. We are all interdependent on each other. But when we were colonized with the purpose of with the colonized of that with the colonization, we're being ingrained into a new system of mapping all the territories or the demarcation, so that the map of Myanmar, if you look at it, the map of Myanmar in the past was beautiful. Myanmar has a map. It looks like like an entity, like a human being. It has a head. It also have a body. It also have the limbs, and like. But then again, it was beautiful, and that it became like this. Became this is the territory of Myanmar, and people who are not within the territory of Myanmar or become strangers. So what I have noticed remarkably is the western part of Myanmar, Rakhine State as well. For example, in Rakhine State is where Rohingya communities live. There are also Arakanese communities also and other communities who live in the western part of Myanmar. This area, before, if without Myanmar being colonized by the British, that the area of the Rakhine region will be along area of the Bangladesh, and these are the borders classified states like Bangladesh, that's or Myanmar. So if there are no such borders conceived by the state, there are no such borders demarcated by the governments. Myanmar borders, Myanmar territories have been, set by the British colonialists. Without such borders, without such conceived borders, Rohingyas will be considered as Myanmar nationals too. The national part of the Myanmar nationalities too. Because colonialism, in a way, has destroyed the natural organic system of people living together in different territories, and that through the colonialization of knowledge, people accept this. Okay, that's the other side is Bangladesh, this side is Myanmar, and that worse than that, as a Bangladesh is Islam, that area is Islamic territory, and that these are the territories and that the wars that has been conceived by the nations and their ideas as well. And that the issue of Rohingyas, they're very much prevalent in Myanmar. If we reflect on that, it is very much based on the colonialism, and that is it is also great. It is a great tragedy indeed if the colonialism and this culture of the maps and demarcation purely for the governance purposes of creating a hierarchy without such action, without such colonization, extra colonization, that Rohingya community will not be perceived as illegal migrants. Rohingya community will be considered as one of the ethnic groups of the people of Myanmar. In relation to that, another tragedy I would like to discuss is that because it's the impact of the colonialism or the colonization that they also that one of the impact of this colonization of knowledge is that categorization people by ethnicity. For example, like these are the Kachin, these ethnic communities are Kachin group. These are part of the Rakhine ethnic groups. These are part of the Shen ethnic groups. These are part of the Burma ethnic groups, and there has been such categorization under the colonialism too, where the communities are being put into a different category. And that's also for the purpose of governance, simply for the governance. It is also does not really look at it doesn't look at the self-determination of each and every community, and that it also in other words it has totally destroyed the autonomy of different communities across Myanmar. From the research perspective, I would say that the colonization of the knowledge, our knowledge, that has been distorted, that has been destroyed to fit the colonial system, to fit the colonial they have the culture of demarcation, they have the culture of the maps, they also have that administrative territories, and which are very much against the nature, very much against the organic existence of communities across Myanmar. I would say that it is very much against the indigeneity of the people, of the different population across Myanmar. As a researcher, and I would consider these are the major losses or the implications of colonization, and I regret all these implications that took place in Myanmar. And yet again, we are also seeing a new colonialism, which is called Burma-centric colonial knowledge. It may consider as a Burma-centric colonial knowledge, or that also the Buddhist that Burma-centric patriarchy and militarized nation building, and building that Burma-centric knowledge and Burma-centric the concepts, and that is a part of the new colonialism we have seen in Myanmar. In other words, these concepts colonized the nation as a whole once again with patriarchy, militarization, as well as Buddhism and Burma-centrism as well. As a researcher, I believe that it is a tragedy because that's a colonization of knowledge. As a in the impact and the implications of the colonization, what are the long-term impacts on us as a whole? But what about the Spring Revolution? What will the Spring Revolution revolutionize or eradicate or decolonize? This is what I would like to discuss in the next round. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Nyan, for a very comprehensive idea about the impact of colonization. Colonization is not only about the administration of the governance, there is also the colonization of knowledge with long-term implications on our beliefs and our understanding or perception as a colonization of knowledge. In fact, if we think deeply, it is even more the frightening to see the long implications. So thank you, Sianyapite, for the points raised. And another point you also have raised is about the Buddhist-centric, Burma-centric patriarchy, militarization of nation building. And that is very deep indeed, because it's very practical. At the same time, if we look back on the past, what has been happening, what we have seen is happening is, how we also need to think about how we can overcome this. Also will be a very interesting topic. That thank you for that, and then we'll come back to you in the second round. So to continue with our talk show, I would like to invite next speaker. I would like to invite Siaso Albert Cho. So my question to you, Siaso Alberto, is kind of similar to what I asked Sian Nyan as well. What is colonization? What is neo-colonialism? Because we come from different backgrounds, we have different life experience. So based on your life experience and what you have learned from different experience, can you also explain using personal example? You are a young man, as well as on the youth activist, and so can you also describe on your perspectives on the impact of the British colonialism on the minority people and the history revolution? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, what is colonization and what is the neocolonialisms? As previous panelist has addressed quite comprehensively, as far as I understand, is that colonization is occupations of certain things that are not belonging to you, not relevant to you. That could be a tribes or a nations or a territory. You try to occupy those area by divide and rule on those area that are not belong to you to exploit for your own interest. For the neo-colonialisms, mean the previous colonization is different with the neo-colonialisms by economic means or by cultural means to manipulate certain territories, and they create a dependency of certain area and people. uh, that is how I understand about the neo-colonialisms. That is how I understand. And when we look at the histories of Burma, there's we can look at the ethnicity into two groups. One is coming from the dynasty era. They come with their own kingdom in the past, and the other one is by the chieftains. In Kranjstic, we have a saying that Cranwell flee if the trunk decay. It means when, because of the feudalizations of the Burma on the Krans, Krans love peace and they are peaceful nationalities. They're just only harvesting and gathering the forest, but they have to flee from their area. That narratives of refugee and displacement has been there even before the British colonial government, but the current are trying to decolonizing this narrative, and this revolution is also aiming for decolonization. So regarding with the British colonial government, 1828 in the lower part of Myanmar, Rakhine and the indirect area has been occupied and seized by the British power. That certain parts of the Myanmar has been seized and occupied by the British, by the with the driven by the capitalisms, because capitalist government, they need materials and resources by occupying certain territory, by imposing divide rule and manipulating and the economy of that territory they had been conquered. And because of those economic manipulation, that gap in class has been widened up at all different areas, by different tribes had different privilege and different those kinds of class politic has been strengthened by colonialism. Those tribal communities, among themselves and by other ethnic groups, there are some jealousies, and because of those privilege that design as a divide and rule tactic to colonize and to accumulate their colonial power. And when we look at our country, this the ethnic dispute has been is because this identity politics becomes stronger because of the colonialisms, because those colonial government and plotted the seeds of divide and rule, and the successive military governments are also using the same tactics into the ethnic minority area, like other speakers said, like Rohingya issues. They try to conquer the minority areas and impose divide and rule for ethnic nationalities. Compared with Burma, the perspectives on colonial government by those ethnic minorities is different. For example, when you look at Quran, a British colonial government created the Quran literature, but the problem is Qurans are not just using, they are not mono-ethnic. They have a different dialects among themselves. And Quran had its own diversity, Bo and Sagals, and they are not mono, and they don't have a common dialect, common literature. It's good to have a literacies by the colonial government, but because of lack of common language or common identity, and that undermining the current politics, many minorities get exposed to higher education and wide open their eyes. And for colonial government, it seems like they try to give some privilege to the minority. For example, like in 1881, there's a Korean National Association has been established under the colonial government. With that association, there has been many Korean national school has been rising up across the Korean area, and many Koreans become very educated at that time, and the economic and cultural standards of the Korean has been increased, and the political status has been promoted by exposing to those higher education. Since Korean were able to build their current identity of their current politics, and during the New Year days, they were able to raise their own current flags and able to organize their own national days. And they are struggling in many areas, but when we look at under the colonial government, currents and others, they have especially ethnic minority got a position mainly on the politics and military wings, where majority Burmans are not encouraged to hold those positions, because colonial government, they tend to promote minority against majority in many of the civil servant positions. That's why during the colonial time, there are many significant uprising. Current Burma communal conflict is because one of the obvious example of colonial rules. It creates current Burma communal conflict when they try to colonize, Koreans are also resisting by decolonizing some of the aspect, especially in around 1940 in Asia regions, that nationalisms and national liberation movement has been it's a sort of decolonization, and Koreans are also trying to seek independence from the British colonial power. And they send delegates to British and UK, to demand for their own territory. After the Japan invasion, Korean has been mobilizing and establishing Korean National Union in the diarchy rules, and Korean has made many political protests and resistance against colonial power before they gained their independence. And there, Korean has been at the forefront of the decolonization before the independence of Burma. But during the decolonization, there are many areas that we need to we are concerned of. For example, like in the decolonization, that it's not the condition that British get independent where Burma are well established to rule the country, but it is exit strategies of the colonial government. By allowing some decolonization efforts, and to what extent we understand decolonization, at that time it comes up to my mind, how well do we understand about the decolonization? Many of the problem and the root cause that we are facing now they has been originated because our national leaders in those era are only thinking to liberate and building a nation state rather than looking all aspect of decolonization. At the time they just only thinking about the liberation of certain nation. Myanmar is a good example. Decolonization is not just liberating certain area or territory. It also needs to grant the equality among the people living in those territory and those area. From identity perspective, ethnic perspective, when we struggle to get independent from the colonial government, but as soon as Myanmar got independence, this minority become being colonized by the majority Burma population, because then compared with the British colonial, this Burma colonizations are harsher than the British colonization upon the ethnic minorities. Compared with the British rules, this Burmanization has been far more worse. Many not only many other mountain people and minority people, they had been accused that this ethnic community as informants or puppets of colonial government during the colonial rules. But because these ethnic people, they become they get something to look up. British has been, they rely on British for their greater self-determination and autonomy. And before the British, they have nowhere to look up. But when British came in, British has been one of their way out for their independence and also greater autonomy, and they have been fighting for that diarchy rules. And Korean has been taking many political stance, and not only Korean, many minority has been taking decolonization from different perspective, unlike majority. This Burmese centric problem, or how do I say this colonization of Burma, by creating that white phobia, instigating white phobia on the Western phobia, and creating Burma populace and Burma supremacies, and become Burma-centric, Burma supremacy. For example, like the colonial government called themselves as a lord, and Burma copy that lord terms, and they call themselves as the king or master. They call themselves master of their own destiny, but not only for them, it's become master rig. Burma are the master rig upon the other minority, and others are the slaves or people that are under their rule, their underlings. When we are thinking about decolonization, we need to look from whole aspect. While we are doing decolonization from one colonial master to other colonial master, currents and minorities are facing these problems. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Our moderator has a bad internet receiver, so that's why I will continue the roles of moderator on behalf of our moderator. And thank you so much to all the people who are listening to and joining for tonight's sessions. Previous two speakers has been giving the historical background and views on this issue, and So Alberto has been had quite knowledgeable on non-Burma politics and become colonized in another master, colonized by different master. So it is very important, to be cautious and to be mindful for us. And for the next speaker is Chinthe, and I would like to invite Chinthe. So through the Spring Revolution, when we talk about decolonizations, and not only and neo-colonialism, how that has effect on different class or different layer of the society, especially for women. And for that, I would like to invite Chinthe.
Hello, okay. Okay,
Yes,
ကျေးဇူး
thank
ပါ
you, thank you.
အရှိရပြောသွားကြတဲ့ဒီ speaker တွေရဲ့ဒီပြော
Yes,
ဆိုဆွေးနွေးမှုတွေကိုနားထောင်ရတာလဲစိတ်ဝင်
after
စားဖို့ကောင်း
listening
ပါတယ်
the discussion points of previous speakers, it is very interesting, and it's wide open my mind, and it is very interesting.
အရှိမလဲ speaker နှစ်ယောက်ကတော်တော်များများလဲဒီ colony
And
ပေါ်
previous
သား
two
ဆိုတာမှာ
speakers has
ဒီ
been talking about many aspects of the colonial or colonizations, and even in Myanmar for the Burma majority and non-Burma uh, uh, minority groups, and what kinds of colonization aspects are existing in the relation between Burma and non-Burma. So when we talk about colonization and decolonization, it's derived from the English, British terms, and we have been borrowing this term. So whenever we talk about colony, many Burma people understand what is colony. But first, I would like to discuss about where this colony, this term come from. It come from I would say Middle English. It is an old English term. Its colony mean cultivate. It's to nurturing, cultivate and nurturing. To nurture and cultivate certain area. Many peasant community may understand. To nurture or to clear certain land and preparing certain land to be productive, and by cultivating and by balancing water and the soils and the lands and growing the plants you want to grow on certain land. That is the process, is the original meaning of the colony. Mean cultivation and nurturing of certain territory, like Nyambi did and Soy Bachu has discussed. Before it reached to the invasion by the larger group into the weaker group. When we look at the war of history, when we talk about age of discovery, at that time they are discovering the whole world, and some said age of reconnaissance, and to understand the world from 15th century to 17th century. At that time, people start seeing colonization as one of the political process, especially in the Europe area. And Europe and Western governments start using as a political process, especially from British. Not only British, they are French and Spain and Portuguese. Those are the major colonial power at that time. They are competing each other by those colonial power, by conquering other. At that time, they call it age of discoveries to other tribes and other nations and other land in different areas, and that is this colony. From the original meaning is mean territory and land. And what are the plants growing in those areas? What are the wildlife and wild vegetation out there? And they discover those plants. And this initially it is coming under the science or science exploration rather than occupation or invasion. Out of curiosity, they want to learn and extend their knowledge. British ended up in India, and at that time is the Burma colony, Prospect Burma, and then they extend their power to Southeast Asia through treasures by making spice trade in spice and carrying back to the metropolitans. The same with France. At that time, they call Indochina. It is the Indochina area with its Cambodia and Vietnam. The French has been like British. They occupy and they discover those land. For Spain, in Southeast Asia, it's Philippines. And the rivalry of British. If British go to east and his rivalry go to the west. For example, like when we look at the history of the Spain, like well decorated person, Christopher Columbus. Many people of Myanmar had heard about that Columbus, who have familiar with the U.S. politics in the Spanish history. He's the pioneer, who pioneer in discovery. And in order to reach to India, he has an idea. He can go the backward to reach to the India, but he ended up in the U.S. And in the U.S., where they met with the indigenous, he discovered those indigenous people in the America. But rather than accepting them as America, he thought with his initial objective of discovering or exploring India, that's why he named as a Red Indian, and they are the Indian descendant. They are the Red Indian, because his initial aim was to explore the India by going around the world, and they ended up until the Philippines. Why I have to talk about this war history? Because when we talk about colonization, in order to decolonize, first we need to understand what is the colonization process before we talk about the decolonization. When we're doing decolonizations, first we need to understand the histories of colonization and the context of colonized tribes and the nation and the land to start talking about decolonization. When we talk about the whole Myanmar, when we want to do, we cannot just say decolonize Myanmar, because as we said before, other speaker has said, there are different colonial process thriving among Burmese societies. So when we talk about Myanmar, so we understand when we talk about colonization, we look the British. The colonizations of British is different with the Spanish colonization. In English, it is more like a material, for British, it's more like a material colonizations. It's more like a material and physical. They discover a new land and territory. I would like to give a quotation mark on those discovery, because they already have that concepts of colonization. Oh, somebody discover certain land, and it is alarming and quite irritating to me. It's not they discover; it has been there already there, even before they discover. Certain person discover certain thing, but that thing has been there all the time. With this material colonizations, that other speaker giving some hints, as I said before, for the spice trade right now in Singapore, with the maritime road, those spice has been trading back to British. This trading route and this new land and area, this eastern area, they said Orient spice, ingredients and other spice and other resources and insects or wildlife products like leathers, leopard leathers, elephant leathers, including human beings. They all consider all of those things as a property rather than living things. They consider all of them as properties, and they transported back to their colonial metropole, to their British queen, like the famous Burmese ruby has ended up in the crowns of those British crown. That kinds of thing, so this Burma colonization is more like a nationalist perspective. That is the way British colonized from material perspective. At Siaso Bachuset, there are the puppets of British. Many people had accused, then British, they call Burma as a province of India. They have no interest to occupy and stay there. That India and Burma provincial, and what other resources they are interesting to extend their colonial power, how they can strengthen and to strengthen their military and economic power by using the resources of those India province. But for Spanish, rather than just taking back the resources back, Spanish, they want to settle in those areas, unlike British. British had no interest to settle down, but for Spanish, they want to settle, not only just taking our resources, they also want to settle, like in Philippines, where Spanish has been colonized. And when you look at the America and Spanish, before age of discovery, those indigenous has been genocide and extinct, and their culture and their tradition has been long gone. And we are talking post-colonization in Myanmar. There's no post-colonization for them. For those indigenous community, there's no independent. What is the liberation? What is their independence? There's no post-colonialism, unlike us. Like in Myanmar, they're carrying many that pagoda bell as a proposal for museumifications and display in those museums. And this is the area discovered by British, and those museum are inherently colonized. I would say that is a separate title and topic that we can discuss later. As we said, when colonization mainly on property is one aspect from properties, and secondly on discovery aspect, and property and discovery aspect. British gave independence to Myanmar, and after they leave the country, that property base, like two speakers has talked about the territory. They draw the border and borderline, who own which land, who shall own which land. It's from property centric allocations of lands and areas, and that gave inherent the heritage, the colonial heritage by material. Well, I also talk about material colonization, but for Spanish, in the those America, not only U.S. American, United States of America, but also Latin American countries and including Canada, and Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, and the whole area has been colonized by the Spanish. And in those area, people in those area, even though they are living in different area, they speak their mother tongue is Spanish. They lost their mother tongues, and many of those Latin America country are using Spanish as their official language, because their language has been died away with this colonial Spanish. And at that time, we call settler colonialism. In Spanish colonizations, it more like settler colonialism. Unlike British, they just not only taking the resources, like they kill or rape. That we can see many in Brazil. And Brazil, the indigenous are the people with a skin color. And for the Spanish, in order to settle in those areas, in order to develop the land, those slaves brought by the Spanish from Africa mixed with the indigenous. That's why in British, in Brazil, there are different ranks of color of the skins of people. That is the we can see as settler-based colonialisms. So okay, let's come back to Myanmar. And when we look at the whole colonialisms of the Myanmar, it's colonized by British, and they take the resources and materials, and some of them settler. Now we also have some mixed blood between British and Burma, because when two races live together, this mixed blood is expected. But they are not settler-based like Spanish. They went back after they colonized. After they went back, now we talk about a lot about the Burmanization or Burma-centric chauvinisms has been started from those post-colonial periods, and people who call themselves Burma, as I said before, who are living in which area as a nomadic lifestyle, and which area is Burma area. Nobody know which area is Burma origin. There are some dynasty and kingdom. Those territory and boundary are always changed in a history. So we cannot show who is the real Burma, who are 100% Burma. Nobody is sure. By propaganda, we say we are the real 100% pure Burma, but nobody know who is the real 100% Burma. If you consider yourself 100% pure blood of Burma, but for people in those mountain and borderland area in Myanmar, it is and then in the previous successive military settlement, there are settler colonialism has been used by the successive government in those mountain and remote ethnic community area in those frontier area. In my point of view, that is, this settler colonialism has been practiced by successive government. For example, in Nichana, because of the army deployments and settlements, that Burmese soldier from the lower Burma has been provided that public housing in those Kachin and allow them to rule. That is the settler colonized process in those Kachin and other area. And the question I received is to respond from the woman perspective. But who are the women? Am I allowed only to speak about the Burmese women or ethnic women? Who are the Burmese population? Rather than talking of the Burmese and women, I would like to discuss gender rather than just women. That colonization is largely related to properties, like sobat mentioned for the manufacturing, like the age of discovery has been already ended. There's no, because the First and Second World Wars, it's the product of that age of discovery. But nowadays there's no that kinds of World War III or IV. Now we have a United Nation. This is the area you conquer, you can rule in this area. But the question remains: are we already done with the colonization? No. There are different forms of colonization, as Nyan said. That's ideological colonization, or cultural colonization, or economical colonization from one country to another country. There are different forms, and that colonialism has been diversified after each of that discoveries. And now they don't consider land as a property openly, like during those age of discovery, but other ideological colonization aspects are there, and one of the aspects is gender. It also related to the history of colonization. If I'm allowed to quote back the history, in those colonial age, not only in Myanmar, but those are the stronger that the colonial age of the war at that time, when they land, when I say land, they just not only see the land as a property or commodities, but they also see all the living things on those land as their properties. Not only the land, but all the living things on the land, and not just that general categorization. They have a different category of properties. As a male, they are closer to the ruler, and for female, they are the properties of the male. That kinds of classification and categorizations, uh, even before the colonial European, there may be no idea like that kinds of seeing living thing as a property. There's no such theory. But after the colonial government, that ideology become prominent by reinforcing those colonialisms. When they conquer, women are weak in their conquer area. Those women need protection. And the male who consider they own those female, that we need to fight against. And I just only talk about this binary of the male and female. There are also other identities that are not included under the binary aspects. So in that colonial area, they don't consider that. India, they call hetero, it is the third gender. There are a very handful of people surviving. They have been there even before the colonial time, but after the colonial time, they don't consider, you cannot identify yourself as a third gender. You have to choose either one, female or male. It's called Victorian ideology, coming from Victorian age.
Then, if we look at gender from the intersectional approach that we divide into group, Myanmar expert consultant Desalwing wrote an article in 1994, and she wrote that that she looked at after the colonization of Myanmar, that the Burma, that there is a Burma mainstream ethnic community, and that is that know that the king and who were conquered by the British colonialists, as well as especially in particular in her paper, she also looked at the current community as well. For example, like in the community which are closer to the Burma king and others as well. Like we were saying that they use the method of divide and conquer, and that current community are martial race. They are warriors. the British wrote that Nizami wrote that the British, in the British perspective, that the Korean men are martial. They are good at fighting. They are active. They are dynamic. They are warriors, and they are very skillful in that as well. But however, Burma men that they are educated. They are they have a community. They are not fighters. By in terms of masculinity, by masculinity that Burma male are that weaker masculinity. So just I'm talking about the ideology. When they put in the kind of ideology and that when they start to recruit that they just try to recruit different and then so that they will fight each other, different community. That is just a snapshot of the colonial period. By doing so that that if we when we reach the post-colonial period, we are seeing that what kind of implication are there from this concept on the gender is that most of the Burma male have that as well, that and that it become an emasculation of masculinity as well. That there is in a way it is to demean the masculinity of a man. So in the colonial if we look at the post-colonial period till the independence era, we are seeing that when the new or the revolution. If we look at all this, and then they will see that that Janet Mamale, we have Lulu Dorma, we are very famous we the authors, and they will say that the women have been women are the the problem is of that that is that the Myanmar women must not that have the responsibility to protect the traditions and value that has been described by the British colonialists. So if we look at if you look at until we have this that race and nationalities law that has been drafted in 2015, these are the gender identity. Women have the responsibility to protect their tradition as well, and that at the same time, that how do the Burma women who will promote and so they say like promote and they promote and that masculinity of the Burma men, which role where the where the women play all this, but of course women will not of course go and go and bear arms in the battle of the revolution, but the women will be good at managing the household. They will be good at household chores, and they will also dress very conservatively and all that. So if we look at it at a superficial glance, we'll say, oh, Burma women are very independent. You might say that they are I'm not talking about the at the time we're talking about the revolution. So that the Burma women were like a part of the revolution, and that this is something we can look at. But it is also, but in reality, but that women that they if you look at the different role that of women, then that women can only participate in a predefined role in this in the revolution. So that was there is the issue of the concept of the gender ideology, if you say. So I'm just reflecting on that as well. I'm not a historian per se, but as an anthropologist, as a researcher of anthropology, because we study anthropology, we study about the human being. So if we look at if we talk about the decolonization of the Spring Revolution, I think it is important to understand that the gender as well. So yes, I'm also trying to summarize right now that so it is this I think these are the concepts that has been there before the colonization that we need to understand as well. So in this revolution, what is happening, and in the next round, I hope I will be able to discuss what is happening when it comes to these perspectives and do this one. Thank you, Chinthe, for very comprehensive answer as well. So in the points that you have shared from the war, you look at it from the perspective of the war history, and that what you also need to understand, what you look at it as so what is happening in Myanmar is also is interconnected to the wall, and that's where it also is connected also to the interregionality as well. So what is happening in the world, what's happening in the neighboring country is something it is important for to understand. When we talk about decolonization, and that so in this in the topic when we look at it here, we have three speakers will share about colonization and decolonization as well, based on they have shared from the perspective of their experience and their knowledge as well. The topic is a very broad for the people schools. So this is the first time time we are trying to organize a talk on this very broad dialogue. So we have three speakers. So thank you to our three speakers for broadening our perspective on these very important concepts as well. We hope that in the future, so we'll also try to organize more important dialogues like this one that may be important, a difficult concept, but it's as well. So what we, Samantha, they has shared that when we say colonization, when we look at colonization as the power, the people, we are trying to control and territory, but colonization is more than that. It is not just about the language, about the material. There is also the different types of the colonization, so the settler to the material colonization as well. It's a very great to learn about different topics and notions, and hope that we'll also be able to learn more in the future as well. And that so we do have we also have the question and comment. So we'll also be taking them in on the future in the next round as well. Next round we have prepared questions about that. About it colonization decolonization from the Industrial Revolution, but we'll also be sharing the reading the comment, and also we'll also be inviting those who have raised their hand to ask questions. I would like to invite those who are joining us on the Zoom webinar link. If you want to ask questions or give comments or share your perspectives, please raise your hand, because in our thought process talk show program, we always encourage participants to join in and participate as well. So while we are waiting for any of the attendees to raise their hand, I'll be reading some of the interesting comments as well. And that Burma governments have always sent Burma to the ethnic areas as a governors, or those are governing part as well. So in a way, they're trying to build they try to gain upper hand economically, politically, and religiously, as well as in the using the some sort of settler colonialism as well. And that might it be similar to Brazil context, as has been shared by the speaker as well. I also think that in a way it is also the same, because some of the minority ethnics have lost their culture, traditions, practices, as well as the language as well. So that the strategy of the military dictators, colonialists, is the settler colonialism to the religious ethnic minorities, patriarchy, and education as well. And that if we look at the new forms of slavery, or they in a way to prolong the dictatorship, they are also in a way use the settlers colonialism in terms of economy by building building economic common interests as well. And that some of the ethnic also in a way could use also act neocolonialism acts as well. We also have under the SAC, we'll see the BGF, or there's some of the there's some of the military, the militia groups will also be as they're colonizing their own community in their own area. So they use economy, religion, as well as on the patriarchy, and that using the ethnic identity as a weapon as well. They weaponize these ideas as well. So that, and then in addition, in neighboring countries like Thailand and China, as well as the international community, also use economy to build new forms of colonialism as well. So we also have accepted the question as well that also in some of the live pages too as well. And some of the questions that we have received before we start the webinar, and that I'm sure that our speakers have already responded to this while they are sharing. So one question is that does that CRPH is CRPH still seen as a government, and the will they will return the power as after the revolution as a does CRPH see itself as a as a legitimate government, and after the revolution there will the power be transferred back to the civilian government as well. And that is also very much connected to the current political context. So we have a next round where we talk about decolonization or colonization in this revolution. So that question will be dealt with by our speakers. Another question I have received is that how do you see the influence of China now and in the future? So that the influence of China, how do we see it, and how do we see it in the future? That is an interesting question as well. And that I think in the first round as well, that when when we that talk about that, that if we look at it from the perspective for colonization, is very much related to it as well. It also is connected to that because points about China are the questions we have always received. So I think that's the speakers wants to respond to these questions about influence of China. So how do you see the influence of China now and in the future? That and how is the in a way can you also connect China's influence to that the colonialism? You be there? Do you want to try? Yes, I would like to try to respond to this question. When we think about this question in particular, so I think it can also be when we look at the influence of China, it will also be connected to neo-colonialism as well. That because it also is partially treated in the first round of the question. When we talk about China, I don't think we can look at it China like per se as well, that and China and that as others. So there are also that other countries which as like China. I think we have to be mindful about all that, not just China per se. So how do we see influence of China? To respond to this question, that we can say that in the current context, that that today nowadays you cannot go and invade another country to colonize. That kind of open militarized kind of colonization no longer exists in the world. However, economically, or that economic colonization, or that that making a country controlling a country over the economy is something we have to be mindful about. Whenever we talk about China, as I said, as I stated earlier, there are also many superpowers like China. These countries are still that if we look at it, they are still looking at the resources of the other country. They are trying to get their hands on the resources or the property of the other countries and use these resources as a way to that as a way to develop the industries. And if we look at China issue, that in Myanmar, for example, that for example, like the minerals and other resources from Myanmar that they would like to get their hands on, and that they want to produce them cheaply. They want to market it in the world's market as well, and that they would extract the minerals from our land. And then not only that, not only that, in addition to the extraction of the mineral resources, they also want to build economic zones in Myanmar, and that they were also building such economic zones as a pathway to doing that as well. That's also something we should also say. But it is we have to acknowledge that China has been extracting resources for their economic purposes around the world. They will extract them cheap, and they want to get those resources very cheap, and that is not just in Myanmar, not just many other countries as well, because they're trying to extract the natural resources very cheaply. There are a lot of impact on the human rights, on the humanity, on the environment, on the nature itself. So they don't look at the impacts. They don't care about the impacts. For them, is to extraction of the natural resources as cheaply as possible. So I was considered that is considered as a cases of new colonialism or new colonialization. And it is not only China, because if we look at this as a system, then if you look at around the world, if we look at the capitalism that is spreading across the world, and that is part of the capitalism as well. When we talk about capitalism, we have to. People might say, "Oh, can we not do business anymore?" No, that when we say capitalism is your accumulation of wealth. The focus is on the accumulation of wealth, and that to be able to become richer and richer, to be able to accumulate more wealth and that power, and that because that because economic power or the accumulation of wealth is very much connected to their political power as well, to accumulation of this possession, and that that when you have the powerful country, and that country like China, powerful countries like China, they would they would try to accumulate they would try to accumulate wealth, and they do it so that they can accumulate more wealth and allow us more power. In order to do that, the properties of the other, especially land in particular, as in property, land of the other population, the vocation, the practices, and that all these will be occupied by them. And when they occupy in such a way the resources of the other, as well as that the livelihoods of the others as well, where there you have, when you look at it from the vocations and the livelihood that has been exercised by people for decades, if not centuries, will be lost, and will also be will be lost, in fact, and that that they would take the resources from the natural resources to human resources, and they build their work. In other words, they also build their power. And that is the accumulation of the properties and possession is a system, it's a global system that is taking place not only in Myanmar but across the world. And such a system has such a system of accumulation of properties cause the loss and damage of resources of the people across the world, and that in a way that also help that superpowers and powerful countries even become even more powerful economically and politically. So that is in a way new forms of colonialism. And if we look at the influence of China, it is not only about influencing the world, it is the influence through the new colonialism as they are, and their action and the way they do is reinforcing the existing system or the colonization as well. So thank you for that. I'm sure the other speakers will have to share something about China too. But I think it is important for us to be able to look at it as well. We might need to, I think we should, our discussion will be also, of course, touched upon by other speakers, but we also need to continue the brainstorming, the influence of China now and for the sake of time, I would like to invite two of the participants who have raised their hand as well. Also, that if you want to respond to ask or share your comments, please take the floor. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, you're audible, loud and clear. Well, I just want to share a little about colonialism, because even in the past, if you look at the Spanish colonialization, you also have the Australia being colonized by the England and others, but colonization have always existed. And that you with this with they have also to the extent of the extension of the indigenous communities, and that that people have been exposed to new forms of disease and that illnesses and that new form of way of living, and like into the extension of the local community as well. And that and then they always have like a very much of a hierarchy or governance system that has been imposed upon the people as well. In other words, we can say that you can also say that this is in the past, but we also need to learn from that as well. What is most important is that after Myanmar gained independence, that the various government and that so all of the various government are responsible to address this issue. So because various governments have focused more on their prolongation of their power or consolidation of power, and that they don't look at the ethnicity issue or the community issue as well. For them, is that what is there that I mean, like if you talk about that the hatred over the one community another, that doesn't they don't have that. But for those who are in those who are governing, they want to prolong their power, consolidate their power for their economic and political interests. They use religion. They exploit religion. They politicize religion in a way to strengthen their control over the people. And this is something we need to understand that as well. And that another thing is that for a country, like after 20 that a country 20 to 30 years is enough time. It could be like one generation or second generation. It's time for the generate for a country to really develop. As if you look at Singapore, if you got Malaysia, within 30 years or 20 to 30 years, within one generation or was two, then there could be a distinct and the development. But it also need to have that equality, as well as because they have development, and because they were able to share the economy, they were also able to ensure opportunities for the people as well, and that's why they are there as well. But in Myanmar, where that religion or their rights have been politicized to strengthen their power or in order to gain power, so that has never we have never reached this level of development or progress as well, and that those powers that is built on such politicized tools never also does not last long as well. I think it is important for us. That's why we are working very hard to be able to revolutionize all these ideas as well. But we are also doing great. But what we have to be careful is about the discrimination, and that it is important to oppose discrimination, but opposing but not only about the opposing discrimination. It is also important to be mindful about the whether do we are we also that we also have to reflect on ourselves to see if are we in a way being ingrained trained in the kind of idea. So we are all brothers, and that we all need to try to build a community, and we actually need a community of equality, and consider others as equal as well. Incredible that contribution. Thank you very much. We also have received some of the questions too. So I would like to read the question as the question. The today topic is about decolonization is for revolution. So what do you mean by decolonization? Do we have decolonized everything? Are we talking about the, just a very superficial kind of decolonization where, changing, renaming every street into, that from English British name to Burmese name as well? Neil Wynne and say that he very much he's run so much about the colonialism, but yet they learn from the colonialism, and they adopt every attitude and practice of a colonialist attitude and practice as well, because because we are also very concerned about the rightists and nationalists could be also be exploiting and politicizing the nationalism as well that so one of the things we have, so very good question, and connecting to the question, we have a second round, and to talk about what is happening about the colonialist ideas or the colonialist concepts and perspective in the Spring Revolution. This is what we'll be talking about today as well. So that so I would like to share a little about our second question or the second round. That let's look at the concepts of the colonialized concepts and the ideas of a revolution. Please do not consider them as a personal attack or the conceptual attack, but it is like having a wound. If you have a wound, you have to recognize that this is a wound, this is an injury, and that we are wounded, we have an injury. We need to find the treatment. We need to find the right treatment, right medication. It could be a topical cream, it could be antibiotic, but we need to find the right way to treat the injury or the wound. Because if we look at Spring Revolution in Myanmar, that we have been, it's almost 3 years with the Spring Revolution. People are saying the Spring Revolution is not only about changing the system, but also about changing the mindset and ideology. So what have been changed, what needs to be changed? So I would like to ask each and every speaker to respond to this question with 5 minutes. So I'd like to start from Sia Albert Chu, please.
Hello. Okay.
Hello. Yes. In this During this 3 year, there are many changes that we have been witnessed, but it is not reaching into the tipping point yet. For example, like on the first year, when we look at our declaration and demand, On the first year, we demand to release political prisoners, and later we develop our demand into the Federal Democratic Union. There are some shift in demands, but we cannot guarantee that the current aspiration is fixed or confirmed, like as asking in the questions that CIPH they abolished 2000 constitution, but they still consider themselves as an elected government. They abolished the book that had been uh, dropped that by military for their own interest. They abolished, but they still want to hold a legitimacy that derived from 2008 constitution and the election. And the worst thing is among the ethnic, I don't want to use ethnic, I want to use those nationalities groups, those nationality area. They are trying to develop an interim constitution. They invite EAO to develop interim constitution for those nationality areas. Yes, meanwhile, they have some colonial mindset. They don't left behind, their supremacy yet. And from the public, from the people side, yes, it's true CIPH abolished 2000 constitution, but they are the elected. They got people mandate, people legitimacy. That's why they have an official mandate. But hard to imagine where those public are. But at least we can say they have their own constituency and their own support behind them as a elected member of the 2020 general election. But as a CIPH and as a ethnic nationalities, they need to sit and review carefully, especially for CIPH. The role of CIPH for this Spring Revolution is also significant. There are many areas they are taking the lead, and they have been contributing a lot in this Spring Revolution rather than working for power. They should they should do what it should be done, especially for young people. For young people, but we need to liberate those nationality area first and strengthen those ethnic nationality area and come together into the federal from bottom up approach. And many young people prefer that kinds of dynamic. But right now, CIPH has been inviting around ethnic nationality area, to develop and inviting to develop interim constitutions and establish government. People want their significant change, but those people who are still in the decision-making positions are still showing signs to go back to the previous positions. For EO, they have their own control area, but majority of the population had no idea. For example, like Hmong and Jiaoji area, they just call it Bago region, but for Kenya, they call it a Kodule control area. And we start seeing some signs of the term using by the General Navin in the past. It seems like they are still trapped in that colonization, colonial mindsets, and they are trapped in those colonial mindsets by using the term created by the Navin. Bear me for a second. Because it said decolonization, are you going to abandon everything that come along with the colonial government, like during Nevin, change all the name in English into Burmese name like Nevin did. But Nevin, even though he claimed that he was against colonial government, but he acts the same like the colonial government to exploit the others. As I said before, when we talk about decolonization, it's not just on hate. We cannot base decolonization on hate. We cannot decolonize on suffering, on based on hate and suffering, like anti-colonial or anti-white, changing from one hate to another types of hate is not the right approach. Decolonization means to revive our own culture, our own language, our own governing system, to be based on what we already have and strengthen what we have already have. For example, like Christmas, and people say it is a colonial games, but when we look at in reality, well, all the Christianities and other people are coming together and to enjoy and celebrate this festival, and that is well accepted in the local context, that we can accept. But for some issues that are not in line with the local culture and belief and religion, those need to be changed. For some we can accept, so it need to be context based. Everything need to be contact based. With this question for the decolonization, we try to translate into Burmese, and we come with the we prefer with the colonial or colony Pedachin in Burma language. It's not just that. It's not just about killing. That to removing yourself or freeing yourself from colonial mindsets or colonial aspect. By ideologically, we need to free ourselves from this colonial aspect. With the same question, I also would like to other two speakers to address for 5 minutes each. First, I would like to give a floor to Sima Chinthe. Yes, thank you. For me, it's a decolonization. The people saying that to put out the colonial wardrobe or something like that. People used to translate something like that. You can translate as you like. We also discussed about the ethnic nationalities issues. So if you want to put out the colonial, all the sense of colonial, even before the are we going back to the 15th gatherer hunter age, before 15th centuries? If you want to go to decolonization, this decolonization has been a global dynamic with the combined strengths of indigenous and experts. They come together. It's not just to go back to the already ended the history. When we say to put out the colonial, but to have a radical hope, I think it had to translate into Burmese. That's why I just use radical. Regarding, I have one article written up regarding with a radical hope. Radical hope means completely different, to have a different and completely different hope. As other speaker has discussed, it depends on the context. Which area we want to decolonization, in which area, and what are the radical hope those people living in those areas want, how they envision their future. When we talk about decolonization in other area, many Christian community, they said, it's one of the colonial project, that missionary has been one of the colonial project, and maybe they need to do they need to abandon their religion, and how they can move forward if they have to throw away their religions. From the political point of view, this religion is it's very personalized issue. We cannot force somebody not to go, not to pray to their God they believe. So I'm Buddhist. Now I'm atheist. That is my free choice. It depends on the future that I envision. that I try to free myself from the religion. I don't want any frame that try to put on me. That's why at that time, at that time I talked with Mon nationalities. So in Myanmar, even we have a sub clan, sub nationalities. Among those ethnic nationality, what future they are forcing or they envision. It's not because I'm a researcher, it's not because I'm a composer or writer. Nobody can decide on behalf of them. Nobody should decide for them. That is the real authentic freedom or liberation, by letting them decide their own. That is the only way, either Burma or other groups, that as long as they are the ruler, then you will not be able to free yourself from colonial. But you will ended up in different form of colonizations. Even the name has changed, just the name has been changed. Thank you so much. In the Spring Revolution, what we should need to carry on for this and what we should do next in this Spring Revolution. Sima Chinthe has been responded to the previous question. Do you have any question? You still have some time? Sorry, I forgot to look at the clock. In continuation to my previous discussion, in the Spring Revolution, from the gender focus point of view, when we talk about gender, it's not just binary of male and female. Another revolution, what kinds of behavior, what kinds of treatments are feminized, and what kinds of acts are matriculants or patriarchic, not to color the gender, like using gender as a verb. In this in this Spring Revolution, we have lots of things that we need to explore more after we are approaching an end of 3 years periods. Those gender ideology derived from those colonial age, how widespread they are. For example, like, you need to be you need to be able to working hard and holding ammunition. We don't know who is the real revolutionaries. We cannot identify, we cannot color or name, and every single action that we are doing, like individual fundraisings or webinar join, people who join webinars, or people who are going to school or working, and all those individual actions, which actions are feminine and which actions are masculine. For that, I think we need to rethink of those things. It's not just pointing out in this Spring Revolution, but now we got more chance to speak out. It is the topic that I am fond of. I'm quite fond of. That's why I talk from that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you for the points raised. These are some of the ideas that are quite related to the concept of patriarchy. And with the revolution, of course, some of the points of the gendering process have come into question. And we hope that we'll be able to have more discussion on these topics in the future as well. Now, I'd like to invite Nyan once again. So what do we need in this Spring Revolution? So can you also discuss on that? Thank you for the question. For me, that what I like to discuss is that that after the decolonization from the British. Myanmar gained independence. Okay, people say that Myanmar has gained independence from the British colonialists, and then after Myanmar had, Myanmar had gained independence, and that Myanmar became liberated, independent, not just in Myanmar. Many of the colonized countries around the world, those the countries in Africa, countries from Asia, like India, our neighboring countries as well. There are so many other countries which gained independence from the colonialists as well. So we have Dutch colony countries. We also have the British colonial countries, French colonialist countries. There are many who escaped, but once that once it is over, that that it doesn't the colonization is does not it's not we have been able to get rid of the colonization when we gain independence, because we talk about just changing the name of the changing the name of the towns, or the changing the name of the roads. That is a very superficial way of dealing with decolonization as well. They call it decolonization, but that's very superficial indeed. So we may do things like that, but in reality, that when you gain independence, and those are countries which are supposed to have gained independence from the colonialists, and then there often always is another that that group or the community that will colonize, or that will in a way dominate the other groups. And it happened not only in Myanmar but also in many other countries as well. You have a majority that came into it. So when we look at that from that in terms of knowledge, colonized knowledge, we are also seeing that as well. And that so often there is also the you also will also see very Burma centric kind of knowledge as well, that if we look at it, that so once we have that once we have gained independence from the colonials, what kind of nation building with that? They have a Buddhist centric, they have a Buddhist Burma country, patriarchal country, where they have all the decision making powers lies in the hands of men. Very patriarchal kind of nation building that we have seen as well. Not only after that, soon after independence, the Nyan took Nyan conducted a coup, and that conducted the coup, and then control the country. With the when we have a dictator, Burma centric, Burma Buddhists, that with the which have the power of the decision making, as well as, and that where men have the power to make decision, and that that the military had the power that to control and to shape the nation. That was that what we have there. When we have a patriarchal Burma Buddhist, that patriarchy circuitry, we have through the through the colonization, we are also that seeing it as that we're being colonized by the others as well. In other words, that that when we say other non-Burma communities, but in reality, when we look at this Buddhist Burma patriarchal militarized kind of a nationalist nation building, the implications, the adverse implications are suffered by all, not just by the other non-Burma communities, but also by the Burma communities, which are being subjugated to these concepts as well. That if we look at it at a first glance, we'll say, oh, Burma are the controlling community. But then in reality, there is also the grassroots Burma who also suffered equally with the other non-Burma community as well. That because of that, they continue to exercise colonized knowledge from the British colonists. They continue the same way. They have the control education. You have the control that kind of concepts in terms of teaching, and you also have the exercise censorship as well. Like there is also there's so much of censorship that there is no freedom of thinking, freedom of writing, freedom of expression, and that there is so much control lead to that as well. In terms of there is also the indoctrination of the Buddhism as well, among others. And if we look at it, then you'll see that Myanmar is a country supposed to have gained independence, and yet that what happened is that they continue to continue to exercise the same colonialized knowledge, as well as a narrative, as well as on the concept as well, that So what we have seen, the narratives that we have seen is that the so-called Burma kings, and that again, if we say Burma, it's just not true because we cannot. There is no way to prove that they are the Burma but the so-called Burma or that those who are and those who identify themselves as Burmese kings, the Burma kings, supposed to have build the nation. There is this such narrative as well, and that in addition to that as well, and that has been that type of narrative has been that narrative is that they had been conquered by the colonialists and that annexed by the colonialists, and that after that after that there was a narrative for trying to gain independence, and that those from the different areas work together in order to gain independence. And then again, I will also try to summarize this, so thank you for the reminder. And that so they try to get independence to work together in a way that the idea is also to fight back against the colonialists together. That's the narrative, that Myanmar military fought back against the colonialists. That's the narrative we have. But that narrative is and if we look at it from the context and perspective of the Spring Revolution, a nation that is built under this narrative that has a fall, that is what has fallen. That in other words, it is bitter. It's hard to listen them because this is a country of extreme cruelty. We know that the state can be very vicious, can be cruel, and that we have learned that in this revolution, as that since the British colonial period, that we also have this construct of the construct of like 135 ethnic groups, 144 ethnic groups, or that that often these are the categories, these are the constructs that has been this has been politically created for the sake of the governance and control. All this knowledge have been decolonized in this revolution. In other words, the idea also is this construct of that this nation has been built by one community or the one type that of a group that also has also been that have been decolonized as well in this revolution. If you look at it, if you look at that we have those who are participating in the revolution, they come from different groups, they come from different community, they come from different political background, from different level of education, from different genders. So when we have such diversity, the diversity in terms of leadership, diversity in the participation, the plurality or the diversity have emerged in this revolution. I say we can see that in the NUCC, we can also see that in the NUG. Of course, there are a lot to question, but we can also see that as well, that this Spring Revolution, in other words, is it is that it is no it is Spring Revolution is not about building one powerful community to another. No, there is that we have seen the decolonize of such knowledge, such construct, because often it is Burma centric, and that often say that if we look at the map of the Myanmar map is beautiful. It looks like it has a head. It also have the different purse and the shape of the country. The map is so beautiful. We need to keep the integrity of it. But nowadays, that we are saying that Myanmar map can be different, can be varied. That we are now having this imagination when it comes to we are having new imagination when it comes to the nation, that Myanmar could look differently and yet still remain beautiful. And that is what we gain from this revolution as well. These the decolonization of this some of the traditional constructs as well, that from this revolution in a way that decolonize knowledge. And that I think it is important for us to be able to use it effectively. It is important to recognize that as well, that if we don't recognize it, and that if it just one individual or one group continue to try to monopolize, try to control a system, that is something we have to be mindful about, work about, and then in a way fight and fight in this revolution. Only then that we will have a country of justice and fairness with equality. That that what we that if this we don't know when this revolution will be over. We don't know when there it is not when we have a federal democracy. It is not like that as well, and that I think it is important that there is always a fight for justice, that the powerful will always try to control the powerless, and we have to be mindful about this danger. We have to be looking at this as a way to overcome as well. Because being mindful about it, being aware about what is happening, the risk is that through this revolution, that through the decolonization of knowledge, that we with the awareness, we'll be able to strengthen the decolonization process in this revolution, so that this way, that by recognizing the decolonization as a process, we need to value it. We also need to continue the process for the way forward. So thank you, and that so in this that you also share about the colonization. Is that when you say colonization, people often tend to only to think about a stand in the territory. But what you're saying is that there is also colonization of knowledge as well. It is not just about the that in our it's also is about colonization of knowledge too. So for our but whenever for us is that we need to the ideology came first, concept came first. I said that only then we'll be able to prevent prevent a revolution from going into the wrong direction, or bad things from happening as well. And that so our thought process is that it's about the ideology, about the concept as well. And in your point is you have just made it a very validly, and that it is important for us to that while we are trying to build a new nation, and that it is also important for us to learn about it as well. And that when we are trying to decolonize the knowledge, it is also important to be able to build new knowledge as well. It is important for us to be able to that keep working as well. That so when we talk about the colonization, it's about the oppression as well. That you also talk about the different groups or the institution as well. That and that it is also important that that a majority or the that I think it is also important that there are also efforts of different groups trying to trying to control the majority, trying to control the minority is also be part of the decolonization. What I would also like to summarize is that and that I think it is important that we have to recognize that many countries have faced different problems and process of colonialization as well. That in Myanmar, we also have different ethnic groups have different experiences too. That when we talk about colonization, and we're not talking about British as well, colonization is about another country trying to control your territory, your people. It's more than the colonization. It's about the concept and the ideas that well that we talk about it. How do we win the revolution? Because decolonization of knowledge will also be key to winning this revolution as well. How develop our idea is also is the essence of what will happen in this revolution tomorrow as well. And that I think it is important to try to able to see that as well, because our speakers have also able to share as much as they can, but they are also trying to share it within the time that we have. But what I do encourage you to continue to keep on discussing, keep on talking about this, this as well, because this is important. Thank you all of you for participating and joining us. I would like to say thank you to our speaker, Nyan, Thit, as well as the Chinthe and Alberto. Thank you for sharing us about colonization, as well as a new colonialism, as well as on the Burma Buddha Central Patriarchal Material Rights and Nation Building, the impact of the colonization of knowledge, as well as what is the decolonization of knowledge in terms of colonialism, as well as on the current Spring Revolution as well. What are the impacts and implications? And that what are the concepts of neo-colonialism, as well as what is the impact on the community as a whole. And so we also have had learned from the many examples of and the impacts on the around the world. In particular, that what about gender impact as well? That that they also share about the impact also and the gender as well. So in the next week, we'll also be talking about more diverse topic. With the team from the People's Scope, we'll be trying to very hard to bring interesting topics for you in this thought process discussion as well. So I would like to say thank you to our speakers as well as on those who are joining us in the Today Talk Show and listening to us from the live streams. So I would like to wish you warm wishes for the 2024, and we hope that we'll be able to connect with each other better and more comprehensively in the new year. Thank you very much for joining us.